पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिराप शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
We will sing Parshad of Vandanam, abridged version with Swami Adbhutananda's verse, the last page in your book, page 56. And I'll just read a translation. Jaya Jaya Ramakrishna, well-wisher of the world. Jaya Holy Mother, Shyama's daughter, extremely pure. Jaya Vivekananda, supremely compassionate. The Lord's spiritual son, Jaya Brahmananda. Ideal of yoga and service, Adbhutananda. Abhedananda Jaya, free from delusion and bondage.
Jaya Jaya Ramakrishna
asato ma satkamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our topic today is Swami Adbhutananda, his life and message. The song that we had in the beginning, what we did was an abridged version. The full song is fairly long. The song includes the names of all the disciples, the first generation of disciples of Ramakrishna. And every line has a name and the special characteristic of that disciple. One of the advantages of studying the lives of these great ones is that while we do reflect a lot on the abstract principles of Vedanta, many of these principles become real, living, when we see how they manifested in the lives of these great ones. Because theory is one thing, to see what these principles are. They may satisfy our intellect, seeing the logic behind it, seeing that it all makes sense. But it will become real when we actually see how these teachings have shaped the lives of people. Because that's what we are here for. While the teachings of Vedanta bring us some amount of intellectual satisfaction and understanding, that's not the goal in itself. That understanding, that clarity of mind should somehow then descend down into the heart. Only when it brings about inner transformation can we say that we have become truly spiritual. So it's not about how many books we have read or how many lectures we have attended. It's about how much I am today a better person than who I was 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And what does inner transformation mean? Sri Ramakrishna used to say that, well, what happens when a person realizes God? They don't grow a pair of horns, or there need not be anything external. But inwardly, the person has completely changed. And what defines our personality? Besides the quirks that every person has, is actually how we see ourselves, how we see the world around us. Because how we relate with the world, how we relate with other people is directly connected with our own self-understanding of what do I see, how do I see myself, and what is my impression of the world, and where does it all fit into the larger mental picture. Now, not everyone may think about these matters very systematically. Whether we think about it in an organized way or not, it's this way of thinking of ourselves and the world which shapes the way we live in the world, the way we relate with other people, what our connection is with our work in the world. How do I look upon my duties, my responsibilities? All of this is shaped by our self-understanding. And so inner transformation means, has my self-understanding developed, matured in any way? A little child also has self-understanding. But as we grow older physically, we have to mature not just physically, but also emotionally, morally, and spiritually. And a spiritual evolution means how much change has occurred in my self-understanding, whether it has become any deeper or has it remained shallow. And that's the advantage of studying these great ones. Because looking at their lives, we get inspiration. Then we say, well, because none of them said, oh, I did it, but because I'm special. And you people just now just feel inspired and just believe that that's how it is. Then it's pointless. It's useless then to study such people. But if someone says, yes, this is how it was done, and you can do it too, that every one of us has that power within us to change our lives in a similar way, then that life, that teaching can be a model. That teaching gives us hope. So that's the advantage. So we saw last month, we took a look at Swami Brahmananda's life. So today I thought it will be good if we can spend the next few minutes just reflecting a little bit, at least a brief glimpse into the life of Swami Adbhutananda. He was the first among the disciples of Ramakrishna to come to Ramakrishna. So that's one specialty about him, that among all the disciples, he was the first one to come. The second specialty about him was he was completely illiterate. Sometimes Ramakrishna is described as being illiterate, wasn't a scholar in the conventional sense of the term. Swami Adbhutananda was even more illiterate than Ramakrishna, because Sri Ramakrishna could at least sign his name, knew a little bit. And in fact, once he tried to teach this Adbhutananda when he came as a young man. He was a teenager probably when he first came to Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna tried to teach him the letters of the alphabet. And I think within a few minutes he had to give up. He said, it's just not going to work. Swami Adbhutananda has also been described as the greatest miracle of Ramakrishna. One of the special characteristics we see in the lives of these great ones, especially those who are seen as who have ushered in new movement, so to speak, who made a great impact, not only in the generation among which they were born, but to succeeding generations as well. And one of the ways people often try to judge the greatness of the great ones is, well, have they done any miracles? That would show that, well, they are not ordinary like us. But in a way, miracles are happening always, all around us, all the time. If we are able to look at them and understand them, we will see some miracles are occurring even in the lives of even so-called ordinary people like us. The miracle that Ramakrishna performed in the case of this completely illiterate one was that how a shepherd boy was transformed by the grace of the Guru into one of the greatest saints of his generation. He was born in a family of shepherds. In Bihar, a state adjacent to Bengal in northern part of India. And his parents had named, I don't know what he was named, because it's not very common, must have been named something at some point. But he was born in a very kind of a small, tribal, extremely poor, family among the shepherds, but very, very poor family. And we read that when he was very young, he acquired smallpox. He caught smallpox, which was a very fatal illness in those days. His mother prayed to Rama knowing that, well, there wasn't any, I mean, most of the mortality rate was what is it, fatality? Fatality. Was very high for that disease. And so she just prayed to Rama to save this little baby. And he was saved. He was cured. And so he was then named Rakturam. Rakturam means one who's saved by Rama. And so that was his name from childhood. Then, as we know, as we all do it all the time here, our names get shortened. So Rakturam, they started calling him Raktu, which then got changed to Laltu. Laltu then became Latu. And when he further came to Ramakrishna, Latu became Leto. And then Vivekananda transformed it to Plato. Because you see that, anyway, we'll come to that. And after the sannyasa, after Ramakrishna's passing, when the first generation of disciples took a formal vows of monastic life, it was Vivekananda who gave everyone their new names. And so to this Lato or Plato, he gave the name Adbhutananda. So Adbhuta in Sanskrit, the term means a miracle. It is unique. So recognizing the uniqueness of his life, the name was chosen by Swami Vivekananda. Rakturam's parents died when he was very young. He was barely 5 years old. He was raised by his uncle. For some years, everything went well, but his uncle soon had to leave their native village in Bihar and come to Calcutta to find find employment. So he brought this Rakturam with him, who was a teenager at that time. In Calcutta, which was the capital of British India that time, the big city compared to the tiny little village where he lived formerly. He took time to adjust to urban life. Luckily, they found a person named Phul Chand, who was from the uncle's village. And that person was employed in the office of one gentleman named Ramchandra Datta. And so Latu, this young boy, got a job that Ramchandra Datta had a shop, a stationery shop, and this Lalturam or Latu was employed in that shop to take care of that as an attendant in that shop. And later on that shop closed, and so he was then redeployed in Ramchandra Datta's family to do all the family chores. Now, Ramchandra Datta, and some of you will be familiar, is a name that occurs very often in Ramakrishna's life. So he was one of the great disciples of Ramakrishna. In fact, he and Girish Chandra Ghosh, another one great disciple, as a dramatist in Bengal, these two were among the first among Ramakrishna's circle to publicly proclaim that here is a special being, a divine incarnation has come amongst us. And of course, in the beginning, nobody believed them. But Ramchandra Datta was a very earnest, completely dedicated disciple and devotee of Ramakrishna. So after Latu came to serve in Ramchandra Datta's family, he was still, as I said, just a teenager then. So he did the work as well as he could, and in spare time we read he spent his time doing wrestling and weightlifting. So he had quite a strong physique. But because Ramchandra Datta's family was so devoted to Ramakrishna, the whole atmosphere at home was filled with religious fervor. And that had an effect. Before that, Latu had no idea about religion, spirituality, nothing. But living with that family, he was influenced by that atmosphere. We can see again, in these little things, how the atmosphere at home depends on what the dominant interests of the family members are. And so because in Ramdatta's family, there was all this, everyone's devoted to Ramakrishna, they are reading, they were a strong Vaishnava family, so there was always this reading of the holy text, singing of devotional songs, so there was this strong atmosphere. And so this servant boy who was employed there was influenced, and then he used to shed tears when he was by himself, thinking about, oh, there's so much to know, and there is, he heard at home when they were discussing about spiritual topics that complete freedom from all suffering and real joy can only be found when we are able to discover a relationship with God. And such things, when he heard, he would just go and just cry, said, when will I be able to experience that joy of being with God? And because he did it silently and because he did it in private, only when occasionally the ladies in the family, when they noticed this servant boy going and crying in solitude, they thought, oh, perhaps he's becoming homesick or grieving for his loss of his parents. So they had no idea what was going on in his mind. So once when Ramakrishna was Ramadatta, he was simply called Ram, again the name was shortened. So when he was once visiting Dakshineshwar in Calcutta, he took Latu along with him. And that was the first time Latu got to see Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar. So we read in his biography that Ramakrishna was in the room, and then Ramchandra goes there, and Latu is still a servant boy, and so he, depending on the prevalent social norms of those days, he was hesitant to go inside, so he just stood at the door, because where the master is now gone to meet this holy man, so the servants are not supposed to be on the same level, so he just stood outside. And then Ramakrishna said, is this the boy you brought with you? Why isn't he coming inside? And then Ram called him, and then with great hesitation, he just comes, and then he said, come and sit. Again, he was very hesitant to sit alongside, near his master. After seeing him, when the boy had gone to, Ramakrishna said, go and take a look at the temples. And then he told Ram that this boy whom you have brought with you, I see in him the signs of a great spiritual seeker. It is said that Ramakrishna, whenever anyone went in his presence, he could see inside the person as if in a glass case. He could just see everything that was going on inside. So I don't know how comfortable people might have felt being in his presence if they knew this already. Just think about ourselves. If we knew that, well, wherever we go, people can see what's going on inside our head, we may not feel so comfortable. The thing that we feel safe about is that, well, people just judge us by how we look. So everyone takes care to make sure that they are dressed well, everything is fine, because that's how the world is going to judge you. No one has any idea what commotion is going on inside. But when Ramakrishna could see everything inside, and that's how, as soon as he saw this boy, he said, I see in him the signs of a great spiritual seeker. We read also that during that visit, Ramakrishna just goes and just touches this boy. And as soon as he touched him, this boy entered into a deep state of spiritual absorption, kind of samadhi of some sort. And he had never experienced that before. And we see this happening not just in his case, in many of these early disciples of Ramakrishna. Usually in the first or second visit, Ramakrishna would just go and be able to assess at what level they were. And he didn't even often have to give them a long lecture or a discourse or a long advice about anything. Sometimes it's just enough just to go and just just touch them. And so that's what happened in Latu's case. And he felt that something has changed within him. After that, Ramakrishna told Ram, send this boy now and then here. And then we see that occasionally to carry out some errands or something, he would always, to bring some stuff to Dakshineshwar, he would come and sometimes stay for a day or two. Ramakrishna at that time was being taken care of by his nephew named Hriday, who served him for many, many years. And then when once Hriday had to leave that place and return back to his village, that time Ramakrishna suggested to Ramchandra, well, if you can, it will be good if Latu comes and stays in Dakshineshwar and does the kind of services that Hriday was doing before. And Ram was very delighted. And that's how then Latu got a chance, a very rare chance, one might say, to be able to stay at Dakshineshwar and serve Sri Ramakrishna. And we read that he just served him just as one would serve one's own father. So he said, with complete, total dedication, he just saw Ramakrishna as his own father. We remember that he had lost his father when he was very, very young. He was just 5. And he served him as his father. And as often happens, we read also in his life that he also served Ramakrishna as his mother. You see, relationships are very complex. So at one level, he was a child serving his father. But he was serving with such love, such care, that oftentimes he would even scold Ramakrishna if he found that he was not taking enough care of himself, or if he was not eating enough. So just like a mother would scold her baby and say, no, you got to eat. So that's how we see love is such a powerful force that a child can become a mother can become a child. All these things occur. Among the disciples of Ramakrishna, Adbhutananda was also, Latu was also one of the two. The other one was an elderly disciple named Advaitananda, who was also actually in age older than Ramakrishna. These were the only 2 disciples of Ramakrishna who had the rare privilege to serve Holy Mother, Sharada Devi. So Latu got to serve Holy Mother, even helping her in cooking in the kitchen. And she was among these, all the disciples, with Latu and that Advaitananda, these are the only 2 disciples before whom mother did not have the veil. So she, as of those days, mother always had a veil in front, so no one really could see her face. And so except Latu. So Latu, she never used a veil. That's what we read in life. In fact, it might be interesting for many of you to know, if you haven't heard this already, that even Holy Mother's pictures were not available for a long time. Although the photographs of her, the first photograph which we now worship in the shrine, was taken way back in 1898 when 3 American women from here had gone to Calcutta, and they had a special photographic session arranged and a photograph was taken. But those photographs were never made publicly available. It was only among a few copies, only among these very closely known devotees, they only had it. And most of them had seen Mother's face only in the photograph, even those few who had it. So it was way much later, only in Mother's centenary time in the 1950s, that was the time then She just kind of burst on the scene with her photographs and books and everything. And then she pretty much eclipsed, I think, both Ramakrishna and Vivekananda once she came. So anyway, so later, after Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi, these disciples of Ramakrishna took formal vows of monasticism. And as I said, Vivekananda named Latu as Adbhutananda. And then we, of course, know the stories, the kind of stories which made headlines about Vivekananda coming to America, the Parliament of Religions, and all of that. So after he goes back to India, then there was a formal starting of the Ramakrishna order with a registered organization and trust and all of that. And so when you had an organization, then Vivekananda had some rules made for the monastery. And then we read in this life that this Latu, one morning, he didn't have hardly had any personal belongings of his own. He just took those few things and was leaving. And then Vivekananda said, "What happened? Where are you going?" He said, "Well, now you have all these rules. It's not possible for me to follow all these rules. I can't stay with all of you." And then Vivekananda said, "Oh, no, these rules are meant for the novices who comes to instill some discipline into them. You are a saint. You are early enlightened." He had a little bit of an unusual daily routine, which probably was the difficulty of following these set rules about this is the time for meditation, this is the time to study, this is the time to eat. There's an incident in Latu Maharaj's life. Once in the evening, he was dozing. He was feeling a little sleepy, he was lying down, and then Ramakrishna saw him and then said, "Hey, what are you doing? Is this the time to sleep? Well, if you sleep now, when will you take the name of God? When will you meditate?" And he took it to heart. And listen to this. For the rest of his life, he did not sleep at night. He would take some nap in the afternoon, but because his guru had said, "What are you sleeping? When will you remember God if you keep on sleeping?" So he spent nights just thinking, meditating on. There was no question of reading. He couldn't read. And he used to be so deeply absorbed. There are instances when he was taking care of Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar. Once he went and sat for meditation on the bank of the river Ganga. As those of you who have been there, the temple garden is right on the bank of the river Ganges. And so this Latu sat for meditation on the bank of that river. And because the river in Calcutta is close to the ocean, so it flows in both directions. When there is a high tide, the water level increases and it flows in this direction. And when there is low tide, it goes in the other direction. So this Latu is sitting there when it was low tide, he was sitting there at the bank of the river. And then this huge wave came with the high tide, and he was completely, just kind of went over and he was thrown aside, unconscious. But he just didn't even realize it. He was so deep in meditation. And when the news reached, and Ramakrishna ran from his room and then had to bring him back to consciousness. He was so deeply absorbed. And then on another one occasion also, that when Sri Ramakrishna wanted him, he started calling out for him and found he was nowhere to be found. Then he found he was just outside again, meditating and so deeply absorbed, completely lost to the external world. And then again, Ramakrishna had to go and get him water and serve him. So the whole reversal of thing. He had come to Dakshineshwar to take care of Ramakrishna. And then, in fact, Sri Ramakrishna says in one place, Swami Brahmananda as a Rakhal also stayed in Dakshineshwar to take care of Ramakrishna. So many of these early disciples who came there and to help and assist and take care and serve their master, oftentimes themselves became so deeply absorbed in samadhi then it was Ramakrishna who had to get up and take care of these students of his who were completely immersed in God. So sometimes Ramakrishna used to jokingly say, they came to attend on me, but a lot of time I have to attend on them. What we see in Swami Adbhutananda's life, it's truly a miracle, because we see what unselfish, loving service can do, especially service to one's own teacher, how it can change and transform one's life. There's one incident that I have narrated on earlier occasions, and many of you may be familiar with, in the life of Shankaracharya, for instance. He had one disciple, was somewhat similar to Latu, and his name was, who later became known as Trotakacharya. So he was Totaka, sometime they used to call him before. So among the disciples of Shankara, many of whom were great scholars and very sharp intellect folks, this one disciple didn't seem very intellectual, didn't seem very scholarly, didn't seem as if he could grasp all of the subtleties of Vedanta philosophy. And so So Shankara would give them these lessons in scriptural studies. So one day when they were all sitting, and Shankara is sitting and the disciples are sitting, and this Trotaka, this one disciple who hadn't yet arrived, and he had gone to wash his guru's clothes. In those days, they would just take the clothes and go into the Ganges, wash them there and bring. And so he used to serve his guru well. So at that time, he was a little delayed in coming for the class. So these other disciples were getting impatient because they were waiting, and the class wouldn't begin until this Trotaka arrived there. And so some disciples said, why don't we just begin? It really makes no difference whether he is here or not. He won't follow much anyway. But Shankara just kept quiet, didn't say anything. And then we read, it's a very dramatic way it's narrated in his life, that there, he was there doing his teacher's work, attending on him. Something changed. Just how the grace of a teacher can change a student's life. And so from there, this young student comes, and it's shown very dramatically in that one Sanskrit movie that came on his life. Those of you who have seen it might remember that scene. Right from that river, he just comes spontaneously composing one of the hymns, one of the beautiful hymns in Sanskrit in honor of the teacher. And it's in a completely new meter, and that meter now is named after him. It's called Trotaka meter. It's a hymn, it says Vidita Kila Shastra. It's a beautiful, beautiful hymn in Sanskrit. And then he came, he sat, and his whole face was shining. And then whatever was said, he was able to give even better and more accurate replies than these other disciples. And they just couldn't believe it. How could, and that's the kind of a miracle we can speak about if we want to talk about miracles. We see something very similar occurring in Latu's life. That towards the end of his life, when he was in Benares, which is considered by many to be the holiest city in India, he passed his last days there. So there, the great Pandits, the great scholars in Vedas and in Vedantic texts would come and ask him their doubts. Remember, he was completely illiterate. He had no knowledge of any texts. He had no knowledge of Sanskrit. So they would recite these Sanskrit passages, and he would then comment on it. He would explain what it means. So that's what a guru's grace can do. And that's why the name Adbhutananda, it fit him so well. And these other disciples of Ramakrishna they knew of the greatness of this brother, this illiterate brother disciple of theirs, and they knew also how guileless, how innocent he was. So sometimes they would have some fun at his expense. And so on one instance that we read in his life was in the early days when the first monastery was started. It was started in a place called Baranagar. It was a haunted house where the first monastery started. In fact, many of the early monasteries were started in haunted houses. Not that they had any special fascination for haunted places, it's just that they were very inexpensive. They didn't have any money, and so they couldn't afford to rent big places. And so the place that was available for a throwaway price was what was reputed as a haunted place. Nobody wanted to be there. And so the first monastery was actually started there. So they had, as I said, hardly anything. So oftentimes their meal would consist of just a little bit of rice, maybe, which they have got by begging from home to home, and then some leaves, herbal leaves, and a little bit of salt. That's it. But one of the disciples of Ramakrishna, his name was Ramakrishna Nanda. He, for the first 12 years after Ramakrishna's passing, he just took upon himself the responsibility of doing the daily puja, worshipping Ramakrishna. His relics were kept in a container, and those were worshipped every day. And so this Ramakrishna Nanda, or Shashi Maharaj as his name was, would go especially from house to house and get ghee and some good quality rice and sometimes flour to make these puris. So it was a very small quantity, but the food offering that was made to Ramakrishna was really good quality. But while all these disciples would be eating just some bad quality rice with herbal leaves and salt. Anyway, so one day when this Shashi Maharaj was cooking, and this beautiful aroma of the ghee and all this is coming, so Narendranath Vivekananda, he saw that Latu was standing nearby, and so they thought, oh, let's have some fun. And so he went to Shashi Maharaj and said, I'm not going to allow you to cook all these fancy things. We are eating all this wretched food here, and you are giving him into the shrine all these beautiful things. I will not allow you to do that. And then Shashi Maharaj says, how dare you stop me? I'm going to do it. And they kind of pretended as if they are about to fight with each other. And this poor Latu, who's watching all this, was so innocent. He didn't realize that they were just having fun. And so he just came and tried to stop them from fighting. And then he's saying, oh, this is what happens in the world. Once the great man passes away, people start fighting. Now these disciples have started fighting. And Ramakrishna didn't even leave any property behind. If they had left any property, these people would have killed each other. And then of course, everyone had a good laugh. So one of the things that we see in the tradition right from the beginning was that spirituality was never equated with the kind of moroseness, with that laughing, joking, having fun was never considered an obstacle to being spiritual. Because in the early days, in the 19th century, if you see the way characterizations occur in those books or things like that, if someone is spiritual, you have to be serious. So long, serious face, as if the whole weight of the world is upon you, then people say, oh, this is really a serious person. But if you are telling jokes, if you're telling story, then it's, oh, that's very flippant. That was not considered particularly very spiritual. In fact, when Vivekananda came to this country, and sometimes people were shocked, not all the time, but sometimes people were shocked at how joyful he was, how much fun he had. And then they said, Swami, why do you laugh so much? Why do you tell all these stories? And then Vivekananda said, well, we are the children of this ever blissful divine mother Of course we are going to be blissful and joyful also. And then he said, but I sometimes become serious when I have a headache or when I have this thing. So anyway, he was making fun like that, but we see when you read the Gospel of Ramakrishna how often in parentheses you see everyone laughs, all laugh. In fact, sometimes there is a description saying that the stories and jokes that Ramakrishna would tell them, sometimes many of these were very young teenagers who were coming that time, and said they would just roll on the ground with laughter. Such was the fun they had. And oftentimes it was through that fun, through those stories, that some of these greatest spiritual teachings were given. So don't think that we can learn about spirituality or about these deeper truths of life or the higher truths of life only when we become serious. In fact, sometimes we will see that some of the best lessons we have learned we have learned when we were completely unconscious that we were being taught. There is that one book some of you may have seen, that all that I needed to know in life I learned in my kindergarten. You can see how some of these very important things, helpful in our life, they come from very unexpected sources and at very unexpected times. And so we have to be, that's why Ramakrishna said, so long as I live, I learn. If we choose to remain students of life, we will see that we are learning all the time. And that's why it was not necessary for Latu to go to school, to go to college, to get degrees, because he was a great student of life. In spite of having remained unlettered in a conventional sense of the term, he was among the most brilliant of human beings ever born, and of course a great spiritual giant. His life can be extremely inspirational. If you want to know more about his life, he, of course, no surprise, he didn't write any books, but there's a lot of his reminiscences are available. Those who came in contact with him and what they have said. There's one book, you can take a look if you haven't seen. It's called Swami Adbhutananda as we saw him, as we knew him, I think, as we saw him. And a lot more information and details about his life. So there is a lot to learn. I'll just conclude by just mentioning one final incident. The Shashi Maharaj, to whom I referred before, he once said about himself, he said that Ramakrishna gave a big message to Vivekananda, but a little message was reserved for me. He was speaking about himself. And when I first read that quote, it just came like a bolt from the blue. In other words, that we should never think that just because we have read Vivekananda and understood him, we have completely exhausted our understanding about Ramakrishna. Each of these disciples of Ramakrishna had received some message from him. And their life, not just what they said, but how they lived, is a commentary on what that message they had received from their teacher. And it's not just that these disciples of Ramakrishna had a message. Every one of us here has a message as well. So when you study Vedanta or study whichever spiritual text and whichever great people you have come in touch with, we can then look in our own lives and say, as a result of my studies, as a result of my association with all these different spiritual resources, what is the message for me? And it doesn't have to be like a huge message, kind of message that Ramakrishna got. It can be a tiny little message, but that's fine. If we just recognize what that message for me is in my own unique life situation, then life becomes very simple. All that we need to do then is to live true to that message. Build our lives, our thoughts, our actions, our relationships, our work, so that we remain true to that central message. So if we are able to discover that little meaning in our own lives, we will know exactly then what we should do next. And I think in some sense, spiritual life is about discovering. But me, in my own little life, what is the little ideal ahead of me? Which of the things that I have read about, thought about, meditated on have become my little goal that I should strive after? If we can find that, then we will never have any doubt about what I should do and how I should do it. And that's one other thing that we learn from these lives, that just that they had discovered a message that they were working in and through their lives, we have to discover, every one of us, the little message in our own life and see what we are doing to work it out. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Next Sunday, Rama festival. So we begin as usual at 11, but we'll have a short worship of Rama. We celebrate the birth of Rama, and so it worked out well. So it was Raktu Ram. We just read about one who was saved by Rama. So it's nice that we will be able to celebrate the birth of Rama next Sunday. We'll have a short worship. Our topic for reflection will be learning from Hanuman, which will be followed by, as we do every year, our annual meeting and then potluck lunch. So this is one other opportunity has come for you to prepare your most favorite dishes and then bring it and share with everyone. If you want ideas about what you should do or how you should bring it or when you should bring it, you can speak with Hena. And yeah, we'll look. Oh yes. So because we have Rama festival next Sunday, Saturday we will not have Aarti and meditation because we have to prepare for the Sunday festival. But Tuesday we will have the Aarti and meditation as usual, and on Wednesday we will have the study group, the Gita study as usual at 7:30. So you're welcome for these programs, and we'll conclude now with a prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.